Hi, my name is Peter Laracy. I live here in Cupids. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time now talking to you a little bit about the history, the heritage, and the culture of Newfoundland and Labrador from the perspective of Cupids, the Cupids experience. So on the screen here right now, we have an image of an actor who's playing John Guy. So John Guy was the first governor of a colony that was established here in 1610. There were 39 colonists that came here from Bristol, England. And Cupids is the site of the very first permanent English settlement in Canada. So it's referred to as Cupids Gold Plantation, and it's now a provincial historic site. So this was in 1610. For 100 years before that, we had a migratory fishery where people were coming from Portugal, Spain, England, France, the Basque Country, and they would come in the spring of the year, catch fish, dry it, and then ship it back to Europe in the fall of the year. So this was quite a departure from what had happened in the previous 100 years. So it was the first permanent English settlement in Canada. When the settlers first came here, they were all men. There weren't any women. And so here we have an image from 1612. This is an artist's conception of what the colony would have looked like, the dwelling house and the storehouse. And you'll notice that this particular image has some women in it. And the women arrived, 16 of them, in 1612. And so, of course, if you're going to have a settlement and have permanent inhabitants, it's important that there be families and that we have generations of people that live here. And so you can see that the people were involved in growing crops. They had some animals, animal husbandry, and they were also, of course, primarily engaged in the fishery and the harvesting of the resources of the forest as well. So this is 1612. This is an artist's rendering of what John Guy actually looked like. This is in the collection at Memorial University. This is an image of the actual archaeological site itself. The site was discovered in 1995, and since then there have been archaeological excavations occurring every year. So right now there's about 170,000 artifacts that have been uncovered from the site. 5 early 17th century buildings, a cemetery, defensive works. And so this is an active archaeological site. It's open to the public, and you can visit there. You can see the artifacts, and you can actually talk to the field workers who work on this site on an ongoing basis. This is a ghost structure. It's like a skeleton of the original storehouse and dwelling house. And here are examples, just a couple of examples of some of the artifacts from the archaeological site itself. So those artifacts, many of them are at the Cupids Legacy Centre, which is where I'm standing right now. And so this is an interpretation centre that was constructed in 2010 to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the establishment of that first colony here in Cupids. And many of the archaeological artifacts have been incorporated into exhibits that are on display here at the centre. And of course the centre is open to the public 7 days a week, usually from 9 to 5. In addition to the archaeological artifacts, we also have historical artifacts, and we're of course quite interested in the intangible cultural heritage as well, the music, the poetry, the stories, the oral histories that have been passed on from one generation to the next over the past 400 years. And so you'll see many of that captured not only in the exhibits here, but we also have a family history resource center, which has quite a collection of family histories. On the third level of the center, there's an outdoor garden, and it actually has 3 images of fairies, or the little people, the other crowd. And so it's a jumping off point for us for talking about the intangible cultural heritage. And this is still, storytelling is still very much a part, of course, of the culture here in the province. And the upper left-hand corner there, you'll see an image of what the exterior garden looks like. And we have some blueberries around the fairies here because many of the stories, many of the encounters with the fairies happened when people were outside the community picking blueberries in August and September. We also have a museum shop, And again, you'll see some of the things, the connection to the ferries in the top right-hand corner. The shop is down here in the bottom right-hand corner. And of course, over here on the left-hand side, we have an image of looks like some kind of a unusually dressed creature. It's actually a mummer, or here in Conception Bay, here in Cupids, they wouldn't be called mummers, we would have called them jennies. So a little bit more about the jennies later. So these are available for purchase. Right next to the Legacy Centre, the United Church of Canada has a cemetery. And so people, when they come to Cupids, in addition to visiting the archaeological site and the Legacy Centre, they like to stroll and explore the headstones in the cemetery. And so these are just two examples of headstones that one might come across. And essentially they are two of the 12 victims of the Water Witch. The Water Witch is a schooner that was lost in a storm in 1875. It was lost on the cliffs at a place called Horrid Gulch near Pouch Cove, just outside St. John's. And so the heroism of the people from Pouch Cove was instrumental in saving the lives of 13 people. Unfortunately, 12 of them lost their lives. So this marks the graves of some of the victims. In Cupids as well, you have an opportunity of visiting bed and breakfast if you want to stay overnight. But there are also dining opportunities. This is Cupid's Haven, which is a former St. Augustine's Anglican church, which has been turned into 4 rooms for accommodation, a dining room at the back, which you can't see in this image. Quite an interesting atmosphere. And we have Skipper Ben's B&B and dining room as well. And then in Brickus, of course, which is just over the hill from here, we have multiple opportunities for visiting historical sites and opportunities for dining as well. Right across from the Legacy Centre, we have a flagpole, and it's used to fly a flag that measures 46 feet by 23 feet. It's a Union flag, a Union Jack, and there was a flag that was actually given to the people of Cupids by Newfoundlanders that were living in Toronto in 1910. And so it was 36 feet by 22 feet. It was thought to be the largest Union Jack in the world at the time. Unfortunately, it was discovered that there was one at Westminster that was 2 inches larger. 2 inches. So we had the second largest in the world. I don't know where they got the dimensions. Maybe they got the dimensions from Westminster to begin with, and they might have given them a little bit of fake news in terms of the actual dimensions. So this is quite an interesting, that's quite an impressive flag, quite striking. It's also used as a site for raising a Canadian flag, and Canadian flags generally are raised there on 2 particular occasions. One is July 1st, of course, which is Canada Day. There's usually a breakfast here that's open to the public at the Legacy Centre. And then people get an opportunity at 11 o'clock to go across the street and hold the flag, and they spread it right out across the street, and they hold it, and they sing All Canada, and then the flag slowly gets raised aloft. The other opportunity that exists for doing this, it sometimes is made available to the public, but the other really striking time that this happens is when there is a ceremony for new Canadians. When new Canadians actually become officially new Canadians, there's a ceremony that occurs here at the Legacy Centre, and as part of what they participate in, that all the new Canadians and their families who are present get an opportunity to gather around the Canadian flag, sing All Canada, and raise it aloft. And it is a very emotional day. It's not unusual to see 50% of the people there crying. It brought to tears, not just the new Canadians either. Lots of people have been Canadians for a long period of time and were born Canadians, so quite a moving experience. In Cupids as well, it may not be obvious when you come into the community, but if you do drive into the community and come to the harbour, one of the things that's going to strike you is a huge headland that rises right up out of the harbour. That's Spectacle Head. It's 334 feet high, 100 meters. You'll see a large rock structure at the top. It's an American man. I'll show you that now in a moment. And this is the American man. It's about 8 feet high, about 2.5 meters high, and about 5.5, 6 feet wide, so a little bit less than 2 meters. And this is Cupids in the background. So this is Cupids. The Legacy Centre where we're standing right now is just out of the picture here. So this is Cupids Harbour. There's an opening here, a gut that leads into a saltwater pond, and the actual archaeological site is this area right in here in the back. So what a view of Conception Bay, what a view of Cupids. This one here is down in Burnt Head, so it's a trail down in the bottom part of Cupids. And you'll notice that there's a huge sea cave here. So you can actually sail in here in a boat, and while it's not obvious to you, there's an opening in the cliffs here to my right, and you can actually sail out between those cliffs. And if you look way up there, you'll see there's a person up there who has their arms extended. And so there are hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people that walk on that trail. Very easy walking, a lot of it has boardwalk, and just fantastic views of trail along the coast. So it's the Burnt Head Trail. And you'll visit places like Deep Gulch, Nordic Cove, Morgan's Cove, Greenland, and these are all not resettled communities. Sometimes in Newfoundland we talk about resettlement. These are abandoned communities. So people that were living near the headlands, and with the advance of technology and the introduction of motorboats, people didn't need to live as close to the fishing grounds and be exposed to the extremes of weather in the wintertime. They moved up into the harbors, and then they abandoned the communities over the course of a generation or two. So this again is the American man. It's called an American man or a marking man because back in the days of schooners coming from the New England states to fish here along the coast, if there was a storm coming from the northeast, the fishermen would scour the headlands looking for one of these. This would have been constructed, as some people say, by American sailors, American fishermen, as a place to mark safe anchorage, safe refuge in time of storm. And so if you're out on Conception Bay and you're scouring the headlands and you see an American man, a marking man, that's a place where you can go and seek refuge in times of storm. And some people may not be able to walk on the trails. This is Spectacle Head. If you look at behind the boats, so that's the top Spectacle Head. It's a little bit of a climb. It's not too difficult. But in Cupids as well, we have the option for you to walk along the harbour front. So it's a harbour front stroll. It's all pretty well level. It's all easy walking. It's all paved. And so these are some of the things you'll see. You'll be right across from the fish plant, or landing port. This is the cannon here looking at the harbour. Spectacle Head is here on the left. And you'll also get an opportunity to visit a monument. This is a national historic site. And this is a monument that was actually put in place long before we became part of the Canadian Confederation. It dates back to 1910. The 300th anniversary of the establishment of the colony. And in Cupids as well, during the summertime, this is a nighttime shot of an outdoor theatre that's modeled after the Globe Theatre that existed in London during Shakespeare's time. Because during the time that Shakespeare was writing his works and having them performed in London, there were Englishmen who were coming here, settling this particular island, coming here to Cupids. So this is a theatre where we have professional actors and actresses who put together a program of Shakespearean works and perform them live in an outdoor theatre. And this is just one example of the kinds of opportunities to experience Newfoundland culture. This is a local musician, Webb Daw, a great accordion player. And there are opportunities here at the Legacy Centre and elsewhere in the community over the course of the summer to hear music and people singing songs, and doing skits and recitations and stories and so on. And so this is, again, back to the Legacy Centre. So, you know, if you come to Cupids, lots of history, lots of culture, lots of opportunity for doing things inside or outside, please come and visit us and enjoy your visit. I mentioned earlier that when people came here to Newfoundland, originally they came here looking for fish. Now in Newfoundland, when we say the word fish, of course we mean codfish. So this is what we're talking about. This is a small fish, small codfish. I suppose we might refer to it in Newfoundland as a tomcod. And so this is what they were after. This is what they were after 500 years ago, and this is what they're still after today. And so essentially that fish is taken, the head is taken out off, the guts are taken out, it's treated with salt, and then it's dried. And when the process is finished, this is what you end up with. This is a dried salt cod. Really good to eat. Now the process for doing that is, traditionally the way of catching fish here in the province is to have a line like this on a reel, and they have a jigger. And so when you say in Newfoundland you're going jigging, essentially that's what you do. You let the line out over the side of the boat. This goes down. The cod fish live near the bottom, and you let it just come up 2 or 3 feet off the bottom, and then you jig like this, move it about 4 or 5 feet at a time, a couple of meters at a time, and these hooks here will hook into the head of the fish, or the stomach of the fish, or the tail of the fish, and so you jig the fish, bring it to the surface. And then when you get it to the surface, it looks like, well, it doesn't look exactly like this. This is a this is a cloth fish which we use for illustrating the process of turning this fresh fish, this is a fresh frozen one, into this salt fish. And so the process is quite simple. Essentially what's going to happen is they'll take a knife and they're going to cut the head off, cut the throat, pull the head off. They're going to open the belly of the fish using the knife. You're going to remove the internal organs. You're going to take a knife and they're going to cut down along the backbone of the fish and up along the other side of the backbone. You're going to remove the backbone and you have a nice fish that will lay nice and flat. You'd have a shed built out over the water, a stage head. You take the fish, you're going to lay it on the floor, put down a layer of salt, put down some fish. The next one would go like that so they all fit together. There's no wasted space. So you put a layer of salt, layer of fish, layer of salt, layer of fish. And that fresh fish has to be covered with salt for a minimum of 21 days. And after the 21 days, or 45 days, or 70 days, it doesn't matter how long it's in the salt, it's only going to absorb a certain amount of salt. Then it's taken and washed out, and then it will be laid outside on a structure for drying fish, like a flake, or you lay it on the beach rocks if you like. And maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending upon the humidity level and how cool it is and whether the wind is blowing or not. And then you'll end up with a fish that looks something like this. And if you take that and put that in your shed, you can leave it there for 6 months or a year or 2 years, and it won't go bad. Very, 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 very soft. So the catching of the fish was a process that was for 500 years, that's what sustained the economy here in the province. That was the main source of sustaining the economy here. All of that came to a grinding halt in 1992. There was a cod moratorium. And instantaneously there were about 40,000 people in the province who were unemployed. And so in the following 15 years after 1992, there was an exodus of people from the province, an out-migration of somewhere around 70,000 people. So that was 28 years ago. The cod have recovered to some extent. There's a very small commercial fishery right now. But Newfoundlanders still have the opportunity to engage in what's called a recreational fishery. So a recreational fishery for me as a Newfoundlander means that I get the right to go out on weekends between this year, July the 4th and Labor Day. I can go out 3 days on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday and Monday, and I can catch a maximum of 5 fish a day. And then I can take that fish and I can use it for my own purposes during the winter time. So do I still catch fish and salt it in the traditional way? The answer is yes. But I do other things as well. So I just brought a small sample of some of the things. If you go to my deep freeze, you're going to see packages like this. These are cod's heads. So when you take the head off the fish, you're going to remove the top portion of the head. You're going to take the cheek and the lower jaw, and that's going to be taken and kept. And that's what it looks like when it's frozen. So that's called fresh cod's head. You can actually go into the head, and you can actually remove the tongue. And so in my freezer, you're going to see packages that look like this. So these are cod tongues. Delicious. One of my favorite parts of fish. You can also take just the sides off the fish and make fillet. So these are cod fillets. So you fry these in a pan or use them for deep frying or for making cod chowder. What else do we have around here? I think that's it. We have something else here, though. I'll show you those in a moment. These are the contents of the stomach of the fish. So traditionally, the cod liver would be rendered out and would be used to make cod liver oil, and perhaps some of you eat now fish oil capsules. It could be cod liver oil, it could be salmon oil and so on. So that's how the liver was used. This organ here in the female fish is called breeches or breeches. Some people call them breeches. Look like breeches, like I said, trousers. And it's the egg sac of the female fish. So it's filled with fish roe. And they are delicious. And then, depending upon the time of year, a fisherman might want to check out this particular part of the stomach of the fish. This is called the podic, the stomach. And the reason they check the stomach is because they want to go inside and check the contents. And so in this particular case, this podic is containing a small fish. This is a capelin. It could be shrimp, it could be small herring, much herring. So it gives the fisherman a sense of what kind of bait they might want to use if they want to try and hand line a fish using a baited hook. And so if you go to my deep freeze, you're going to find a collection of capelin. These have been salted, and we keep them in the fridge in addition to the fact that they've been salted. Or sometimes we just take the stomach out, take the head off, and you'd freeze them like this. So this is a package of a capelin that I'd fry in a pan, something like you'd fry trout. So those are examples of the kinds of things that you'd see. And so, as I said, codfish has been very important for the last 500 years and continues to be very much a part of the diet and the things that people eat here in the province even to today. That'll work?
That's accordion? Accordion, is it?
Accordion, yeah?
All right.
You know when you're ready, yeah?
Any like names for the...
All right.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier that people came here to engage in the fishery, particularly the cod fishery. So if you were to look at a map of Newfoundland and Labrador, you'd find that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small communities called outports that are scattered around the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador. And some of these are quite isolated. And so people had to depend upon one another in order to survive, and they had to find ways of entertaining themselves. And so they do that by singing songs, telling stories, doing recitations, playing musical instruments and so on. And one particular tradition that developed here, it particularly applies to Christmas time. So from Boxing Day to Old Christmas Day, which is January the 6th, Newfoundlanders would engage in a process called mummering, or here in Conception Bay it's called jennying. And so essentially what happens is somebody dresses up in disguise, and they try to find several other people to join them, and they'll go and knock on people's houses. And when they knock on the house, they may say something like, "Please let the Jennies in." So they would disguise their voice. They disguise their appearance and they disguise their voice so that the people inside don't know who they are. And so the host would invite them in and would give them hopefully something to eat and something to drink. And in return for that, the visitors, the mummers, the Jannies would provide some entertainment. And so I'm going to take a moment and just explain to you a couple of things that we would get as children. We would do this as children here in Cupids. So if you visited a home at Christmas time and you were a child, you hoped that you might get something like this. This was a real treat. This is a 5-pointer apple. It actually has 5 little points on the bottom. And the only time you would see them was at Christmas time. Or you might get an orange, maybe some grapes, a piece of fruit cake, or you might even get a kiss. And I don't mean a kiss on the cheek. A kiss is a candy that comes from Purity Factories, manufactured in St. John's. So these are the kinds of things that we would look forward to as a child. And you might also get some of this. This is called Purity syrup. So I'm just going to show you how this works. This is sweetened liquid. Put a little bit in a drop of a glass, not too much. Put the stop. Add some water to your glass. And depending upon how much of the syrup you put in there, it's going to affect how sweet the liquid is, or it depends upon how much water you put in there. I drank this as a child, and if you visit my home now, you'll find I have purity syrup on hand. 7 days a week, all year long. Good. Now, if you decided that you were going to go out and go jennying with your friends, you may decide that you need some kind of an outfit. So you might decide to put a hump on your back, or you might decide to put a hump on your belly, make your belly look a little bit bigger than it normally would. And so you might go something like this. You can do it fairly quickly. Get a rope or a belt of some kind and tie this in place. Bring it around. Quick knot in it. Probably put on some kind of a rope. You might take, if you have a robe or a coat, a jacket, you turn it inside out so that somebody would not be able to identify that it belonged to you. Thought I had a belt. Oh, belt was on the inside. Not a very good Jenny today, am I? You have to cover your face, of course. And you're going to be doing it when the weather is cold, so you want to make sure you have some kind of a cap on. And so here we have one example of the kind of outfit, because basically you're making a costume not from store-bought materials, but from materials that you would have at home or that you borrowed from a family member. So when you visit, someone may decide they're going to sing a song, or somebody might decide they'll do a recitation. A recitation is it's like a poem. It has a rhyming verse to it. A simple little recitation might go something like this. Here's a recitation about babies. It's a very short one. Some of the recitations are very, very long. Babies. Babies aren't a lot of help. They don't earn a living wage, and they seldom sew or paint the house at such a tender age. But they're kind of nice to have around to play with and relax. And they sure do come in handy when you pay your income tax. Babies. And someone might decide you're going to play a little bit of music, and the mummers might dance. So let me see if I can... And so hopefully somebody will get up and dance. Some of the mummers might have an instrument like this. Another homemade instrument. This is called an ugly stick. So it's a mop, an old-fashioned mop. Somebody puts a tin can on the top, put some kind of a head on it. You take washers or you take the stoppers off of beer bottles and put a hole in them and put nails or screws in them, and get some kind of an old boot to go on the bottom. And this is a homemade musical instrument. It would be played something like this. That's the mummers. You mentioned mummering is a traditional Newfoundland practice at Christmas time. A more modern tradition is that of screeching. So a screech-in is essentially a ceremony that somebody would go through, a visitor to the province, somebody who is not a Newfoundlander, would be made an honorary Newfoundlander by going through a series of actions and activities as part of this inauguration ceremony. So one of the things that you'd have to do if you wanted to become a screecher, to be screeched in and become an honorary Newfoundlander, is you'd have to dress like a Newfoundlander. Now the screech-in takes various forms depending upon where it's done in the province. So somebody might ask that you put on a hat, for instance, a sou'wester. So a typical hat that would have been worn by fishermen years ago. They might ask you to eat something that a Newfoundlander would eat. So you might be asked to eat capelin. These are dried capelin, small fish that circulate around the coastline in the summertime. You might be asked to talk like a Newfoundlander. So somebody might say, ask you to repeat, "Long may your big jib draw, long may your big jib draw." Or, "Give me some of that, boy, give me some of that, boy." Or, "Yeah, I'll do that now once, I'll do that now once, I'll do that now, boy, I'll do it once." And you'd be asked to repeat these phrases after a Newfoundlander. The other thing that you would be asked to do is you might have to dance like a Newfoundlander or sing like a Newfoundlander. One of the things that you would have to do is you would have to take a drink of Newfoundland screech. So Newfoundland screech is essentially rum that comes from the Caribbean. Some people refer to it as Jamaican rum. So dark rum that would have come back from the Caribbean years ago when Newfoundlanders were sending salt fish down to the Caribbean, molasses, sugar, and this rum would come back. And so you'd have to take a shot of that and drink it down right straight without any chasers. And the last thing that you would have to do, you would have to show the appropriate respect for the king of all fish in the ocean. And that is, you'd have to take a codfish and you'd have to put it up to your lips and you'd have to kiss the cod. And if you kissed the cod and did the other activities as part of the ceremony, one could then declare that you were in fact an honorary Newfoundlander. You were a screecher, and in fact you were screeched in. And you'd actually get a certificate to prove it. So that's a Newfoundland screecher.